So let's start this session with some more meditation. So in the sutra on the foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutra, the Buddha first teaches mindfulness of breathing. He just gave really simple instructions, find a quiet place, sit down, and then put your attention on your breathing. And then he also went on to give some additional instructions, such as being aware if the breath is long or short. So sometimes, if you pay attention to your breathing, sometimes you notice you take a long breath, like, maybe we call it deep breath. And other times the breath is more short or shallow. And I don't know why, the reason for that. Maybe our lungs just sometimes need more air. But that's normal, that's natural. And, we should just allow the body to breathe and not try to keep the same rate of breathing all the time. And then the Buddha advised to be aware when you're breathing in, if it's a long breath, when you're breathing out, if it's a long breath, or if you're breathing in, it's a short breath. If you're breathing out, it's a short breath. So I'm not sure the reason for this instruction, but it may be that it just makes us more aware of our breathing, in addition to just breathing coming in and going out, but noticing the different rates of breathing, long and short. And so I thought we could do a meditation and start off as before with just watching the breath coming in and going out. And then partway through, I'll remind you about this other instruction the Buddha gave of being aware if the breath is long or short. It just helps us to have greater awareness of what's happening with our body, with our breathing. Okay, so first, check your sitting position and try to have your back straight, if that's possible. It just helps the mind to be more awake, alert, clear. Let your shoulders relax. Now your hands resting in your lap, right on top of left. The two thumbs touching. Let your mouth and jaw relax. And if you touch the tip of your tongue to the roof of the mouth behind the upper teeth, then you won't need to swallow so much. And if you can leave your eyes open just a little bit with the gaze directed downwards, that can help you to avoid sleepiness. So now it's the afternoon and we might be still full from lunch, our stomach full. And these are conditions that can lead to sleepiness. So we should try to stay awake during meditation. So keeping the eyes open a little, just so there's light coming into the eyes, can prevent sleepiness. And when you feel ready to, you can place your awareness on your breathing. Just letting the body breathe naturally. Not trying to control or interfere with the breathing. And if you find it helpful to count your breaths, you can do that in rounds of 5 breaths or 10 breaths. And just do the best you can to keep your mind on the breath. And anytime you notice that your mind has wandered away from the breath to another object, thought, sound, memory, anything, then let go of that other object, put it aside, and return your attention to the breath. So now, just gently start to notice if your breath is long or short. So Buddha's advice is, if you're breathing in a long breath, that you notice that you're breathing in a long breath. Likewise, if you're breathing in a short breath, you notice that, you're aware of that. So this doesn't mean we should try to breathe in a long or short way, but if it happens, if our body just breathes like that, then we notice that, we pay attention to that and are aware of it. So while doing meditation, we might notice like disturbing thoughts or emotions in our mind. For example, irritation, feeling of irritation or aversion might be because of some noise, some sound that somebody's making in the room or from outside. Or a memory might pop up. Yeah, remember some experience that you had with another person, and that person did something and you felt annoyed or even angry at them. So that memory might arise in your mind, and then that feeling of aversion could come up. Or it could be attachment, yeah, desire that could come up. Like if we, again, a memory of some nice place that we went, some nice experience that we had. So that memory might come up, and then desire, wanting to go back and have that experience again. Or maybe somebody's playing music, and it's the kind of music you like, and you may have desire to go, get closer, listen to that music. So these are just some examples of what we call afflictions or the disturbing emotions that could arise when we're meditating. So what do we do if one of these arises? It depends on a few factors. Partly, how developed your practice is, how much experience you have in your practice. Someone with a lot of experience in the practice might be able to just notice that thought, that emotion, and then let it go without getting involved further in it. But someone not so experienced in the practice may not be able to do that. And instead their mind kind of gets stuck in that particular emotion, and kind of hard to just let go of it. So, like I mentioned earlier, there are like tools that we can use with different emotions. And so if you know some of those tools, you can use those. Sometimes you might have to try a few different tools before you find one that works. Like, just to give an example from my own experience, one time I was at Usaling, doing a retreat in Usaling, south of Spain, and it's pretty quiet there, but there's some noise. And one of the noises that disturbed me was motorcycles again. So on the opposite mountain, there's a road that goes up the mountain, and it's quite far away, so you don't really hear the cars very much. But there's certain motorcycles that are really loud. They make a really loud noise. So when those motorcycles were going up that road, when they're going up, they have to rev the engine more. So they were particularly loud. And I found myself being annoyed at that sound, finding it hard to just let go of it. So I tried a few methods, and one that helped, I just changed my way of thinking about this noise. Instead of being annoyed, angry, I would think, about the people riding the motorcycle, and hoping that they wouldn't get into an accident. Like wishing them to have a safe journey, and not have any accidents as they are traveling, and wishing that they will get where they want to go, and just have enjoyment, have happiness. So this is what we call loving kindness. Loving kindness, or metta, is good feelings towards others and wishing them to be happy and to not suffer. So I was just generating loving kindness for those motorcycle riders, and wishing that, their journey will be pleasant and successful, and they won't meet with any harm. So by thinking in that way, when I heard the sound of the motorcycles, then it stopped being a source of irritation. Yeah. So I just kind of changed my way of thinking. And in that way, let go. I was able to let go of the annoyance. So that's just one example of a tool, a method that you could use to just change your mind, shift your mind, so that you're seeing the object that is causing you aversion or annoyance in a different way, so that instead of being annoyed, you can see it in a more positive way. Yeah. And I also mentioned impermanence. So that's another tool that you can use. Whatever noise there is that might be annoying, it's probably impermanent. It's probably not going to last. Yeah. So eventually it'll stop. So just remember that it's impermanent, and hopefully that will be true. It won't go on and on and on. And the same with things that we might think of and feel desire, desire, attachment for. If we remember that they too are impermanent, they're not going to last. And so they can't give us real long-lasting satisfaction, happiness, pleasure, right? So it's just very limited pleasure that we can get from them. So reminding ourselves of that can help. And that reminds me, I remember another experience I had long ago. Again, I was in a retreat, doing a retreat in Dharamsala, actually. And one night, I was sitting in my room doing my practice, and I heard music, and I knew that it was a party. There was a party some of my friends were involved in. And because they'd been planning it for a while. And so I could hear the music, and then my mind got sort of distracted by the music, and I kind of felt this wish to go there and be with my friends, and enjoy this party with them. So for a while I was just trying to, stop my mind thinking that way, but it kept going. It was very hard. So then finally I tried a different approach. I said to myself, okay, let's go to the party. And I just imagined, I didn't actually go physically, but I just imagined myself going to this party and being with my friends. And then after a few minutes, I realized I don't really want to be here. I want to be back in my meditation room doing my meditation. So it was almost like, the desire was just to see my friends, but not to actually stay there in the party. So once I realized that, then I no longer had this desire, this attachment, and I could just ignore the sound of the music and focus on my practice. So those are just a couple of examples where I had to kind of play around and try different things before I found something that worked, that was effective in stopping a particular distraction or disturbance. So, yeah, so that's something you could try. You could try something on your own, you know, be creative, come up with your own creative method to deal with problems, or from the teachings, things you've heard, things you've read, and the teachings that might help you deal with different disturbances to your meditation. But the idea is to, try to find a way of dealing with distractions, with disturbances to your meditation, so that you can then just let go of that, not be bothered by it anymore, and return to your main practice, like meditation on the breath. Okay, so then let's continue with the material on the slides. So this morning I got to the point of introducing the four establishments of mindfulness on the body, feelings, minds, and phenomena. So those four sort of cover all, whatever exists falls into those four. And it's good to start with the body because that is something more kind of easy to recognize, more concrete, solid. And we can see our body, and so it's easier than the mental states like feelings and minds. So the next, so this next slide is talking about four misconceptions, wrong conceptions. And so in addition to the afflictive emotions like anger and greed, we also have these mistaken conceptions about things that exist, like our bodies. And the Buddha said that these mistaken conceptions are also factors that keep us stuck in a situation of suffering, what we call samsara. And so it's good to check if we do have these conceptions, and if we do, then work on changing them. But just to mention, some of you might be new to the Buddha's teachings, and just a general guideline when it comes to learning Buddhism. The Buddha didn't want people to have just blind faith. You know, like people sometimes say, oh, whatever the Buddha says is true. It's true because the Buddha said so. So the Buddha didn't like that kind of attitude. He wanted people to check, to investigate, use our own intelligence. We have the ability to know if something is true or not, if it's right or wrong. So we need to use that. And the Buddha said, use your own intelligence, investigate what I'm saying to see if it's true or not. Okay, so Buddhism is not dogmatic. Like some religions, they have a set of beliefs, and you're supposed to believe those things, right? You can't question, right? You have to believe it because it was said by some holy being, or it's written in some holy book, and so you have to believe it, you have to accept it, you can't question it. So Buddhism isn't like that at all, just the opposite. So even the Buddha himself said, don't just believe what I'm saying, don't believe it. Check it out for yourself, investigate it for yourself. So that's very much encouraged in Buddhism. And so, so whatever you hear, whatever you read about the Buddhist teachings, you're invited to be skeptical, to ask questions, to investigate for ourselves. This is what the Buddha wanted us to do. He wants us to investigate for ourselves and see if these things are true. So with these 4 misconceptions, the Buddha said these are misconceptions, but we have to investigate that for ourselves. We have to see. So the first one is to think that whatever is impermanent. Impermanent things are permanent. So I already talked this morning about impermanence and how the Buddha said that our bodies and our minds and the things around us in the world are impermanent. And the meaning of impermanent in Buddhism is mainly that they change. They're not fixed and static, frozen, but changing all the time. So that's the reality of all these things. And yet we have this idea that they're not permanent. Sorry, they're not impermanent. That we think they are permanent. Yeah. So you might challenge that. You might say, no, I don't think that way. I know that my body is impermanent. It's not going to last forever. It's going to die, right? But mainly that's up here in our head, our intellect. We say, yeah, I know human beings are impermanent. Human beings are going to die. But then when it comes to our heart or our gut, our emotions, the way we feel, then it looks a little different. Yeah, like for example, when somebody we know, a family member or a friend or a neighbor or anybody, when we hear that that person has died, right? We sometimes get that news. Yeah, so-and-so has died. We feel, oh, how could that happen? Have you ever noticed that? It's just like a shock. Like, how could that happen? I just saw them yesterday or this morning. How could they die? Right? So then if we really understood impermanence, if we really accepted the impermanent nature of things like people, bodies, and so on, we wouldn't be so shocked when somebody dies, because that's just natural, that's just normal, that people die. And they don't necessarily die at a certain time, like when we think they should, right? But, things just happen. People have heart attacks, they get into accidents. There's all different things that can happen and cause someone to die. So, so that's one example of how there's a disconnect, mismatch between our head and our heart. Up here, we know, everyone's going to die, I know that. But then when it happens, it's like hard to believe, hard to accept. And also with our own body, you know. Again, we think, yeah, I know my body won't last forever, and it will get old, it will die. But then we wake up in the morning, we look in the mirror, and we see there's a new wrinkle there that wasn't there before. More gray hairs here. Or our eyesight is decreasing. Our hearing, yeah. I got hearing aids not long ago, just the end of last year. And I mean, I know my hearing was getting bad for years and years and years, but I had a lot of resistance to getting hearing aids. And I think that that's normal, right? People don't like to get hearing aids because it's kind of a sign of aging, right? We don't really want to admit that our body is getting old and falling apart. And we also don't want other people to notice that we're getting old and falling apart. So I finally broke down. And yeah, so again, if we feel unhappiness, aversion, or shock when we notice these kind of changes happening with our body, then again, that's like, why would we feel that way? If we really understood impermanence, if we really accepted impermanence, yeah, then we shouldn't be so upset. Yeah, so so those are kind of examples or signs that we don't really accept things as impermanent. Things that are impermanent, we tend to see them as permanent. And I think it's more like wishful thinking. we want certain things to be permanent. Now we want our youth, our healthy young body, we want that to be permanent, never change. We want our friends, loved ones, pets, and so on to be permanent and always there and never change, never go away. So it's a wish to have things be permanent. But just because we wish for that, can we make that happen? Yeah. So the Buddha said it's very important to understand impermanence, accept impermanence. It's a very, very powerful meditation. It's actually meditation on impermanence and understanding impermanence. So, so as long as we don't accept impermanence and we continue thinking things are permanent when in fact they're impermanent, then this is one factor that keeps us stuck in suffering. We're actually creating suffering for ourselves by not accepting impermanence. But it takes time to accept these ideas and make them part of our life. And people sometimes feel unhappy about the idea of impermanence. They find impermanence depressing, like, oh, I wish things were not impermanent. So it doesn't exactly bring joy. But we can remind ourselves of the positive side of impermanence. There are positive aspects of impermanence. For example, if we weren't impermanent, especially our mind, in particular our mind, if our mind was permanent instead of impermanent, then we wouldn't be able to change our mind. We would have to have our afflictions, our delusions forever and ever and ever. We wouldn't be able to overcome them and have more positive thoughts. So that would be really depressing. That's something to be depressed about, right? To be permanently deluded, permanently confused. Yeah. So the fact that our mind is impermanent, our delusions are impermanent, that means we can overcome them. We can be free of them. And in that way we become free of suffering. So that's good. That's a positive thing. And Thich Nhat Hanh, in one of his books, he tells the story of one of his students, a man who was a father, and I guess he was talking one day in his family about impermanence, and not very happy about impermanence, about things being impermanent. So he was expressing that in front of his family. And one of his children, his little child, said, "But Daddy, if things weren't impermanent, I couldn't grow up. I wouldn't be able to grow up. I would always have to be a small child." So, yeah. I mean, maybe parents would like that. They want their children to stay small and always be at home, not grow up and go away. But, they have to be able to develop themselves and live their own lives and, find their own way in the world. So again, this is a positive side of impermanence. That, babies come into the world and they don't stay babies forever. They grow and they grow, become children, and then they become adults and so on. So, so there's positive sides of impermanence. It's not necessarily a bad thing. We just have to accept it. And as we get more familiar with impermanence, we get beyond any unhappiness about it. We come to just accept that is the way things are. And it's much better to accept it rather than push against it, resist it, try to reject it. So once you come, you get at peace. You become at peace with impermanence. Then you're not so unhappy anymore. The second misconception is thinking that unsatisfying things are satisfying or pleasurable. So the Buddha said that actually everything in samsara is the word for the kind of situation we are in, as long as we're not enlightened. As long as we haven't yet reached enlightenment, liberation, nirvana. So as long as we're not yet enlightened, we are in samsara. So samsara is, I mentioned before, it's like a circle, going around in a circle. Being born, we live, we die, and then again we're born, we live, we die. So we keep going through those experiences again and again and again, and experiencing dukkha, suffering. So according to Buddhism, everything in samsara is unsatisfying, is not really pleasurable or satisfying. So even the beautiful things, the pleasurable things, the most delicious food, the most beautiful music, and so on, whatever beautiful things there are in samsara, they're not really satisfying. Partly because they're impermanent. They're impermanent. They don't last. So they change, they disappear. And also whatever pleasure we experience, whatever enjoyment we have with them is also impermanent. Okay? So this is something we need to investigate. We need to check for ourselves. But if you just look at, think about some pleasant experiences that you've had and ask yourself, how long did that last? How long did that last? And was it really satisfying? Did I really feel satisfied by that? I was doing this one day recently. In the place where I live, someone had given us, kiwi fruits. Yeah. So most kiwis are green, I think, but there's also yellow kiwis or golden. They call them golden kiwis. Have you ever eaten a golden kiwi? Well, I had this golden kiwi and I bit into it and it was like, wow. It was so delicious. And for a moment, my mind was, kind of excited about that delicious taste. But then I asked myself, well, how long does this last? So, you get this burst of delicious taste and the pleasure of that. But then, after a few seconds, it's gone. That taste disappears. That pleasure disappears. Yeah. So it's good to experiment with this, to investigate this. Yeah. Some pleasant experience, like a delicious taste, or listening to beautiful music, or looking at some beautiful object. And, there's some pleasure there, but how long does that last? How long does that pleasure last? Maybe a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, maybe longer. But eventually, sooner or later, it's gone, right? So that's the meaning of this. The so-called pleasant experiences we have within samsara are not really satisfying. They don't last. Then number 3 is that unattractive things are attractive. So, just for example, in magazines and on the internet and so on, there's advertisements. Yeah, we're always kind of confronted with advertisements, and many of these advertisements have models like attractive young women and men, advertising some product, beauty product or clothes or whatever. And they probably use attractive young people because that's typically an object that attracts our attention, right? We are attracted to other bodies, young, attractive bodies. So they really catch our attention. I remember once opening up a newspaper in America, and there was an advertisement for a place that sells tires, for cars or trucks, tires. And then, so I have these pictures of tires and this attractive young woman standing next to the tires. Now, what does this young woman have to do with tires? Nothing at all, but it's just to attract attention. So we know this, right? We're well aware of how advertisers use bodies, young, attractive bodies, to catch our attention, so that then we will be interested in their products and want to buy their products. Okay, and then they make more money. So generally, human beings do see other bodies, other human bodies, as attractive. But are bodies really attractive? Is the body really attractive? So we're going to explore that on the next slide. I'll go into that more carefully. But well, okay, here we are. So just to give an example, so here's a photograph of a beautiful young woman. with beautiful skin. Maybe it's an ad for some kind of skin product or makeup, right? And so we look at that and we think, wow, look at that skin. It's so beautiful. I mean, it's probably, what I've heard is they use, what is it, like Photoshop or, yeah, they have some techniques to get rid of any kind of blemishes, any kind of faults. So she probably doesn't really look like that, right? So they can do all kinds of things. But I mean, some people do have really beautiful skin, especially, you know, when you're young, in your teens, 20s, and so on. Your skin can be really, really beautiful. So it can look like that. Now, on the other side, that's a photo of the skin under a microscope, you know, like a very powerful microscope. This is what skin looks like, you know, when you look really, really closely. So does that look attractive? That picture on the side? Does that look beautiful? What do you think? Does anyone find that beautiful? Yeah. So the point is, you know, when we don't look carefully, we might think some object is attractive. But when we look more carefully and really examine carefully, then, yeah, is it true that it's so attractive? And also some other information about the skin. It said that on every square inch of our skin, there are 3 million bacteria. So those must be incredibly tiny. We can't. 3 million bacteria. Very tiny. On every square inch. I don't know what that is in centimeters. That's a few centimeters, maybe a few centimeters. Yeah. And another thing about the skin is that the skin cells are constantly dying and falling off. You know, bits of our skin are dying and falling off. And so it's said that our body sheds 600,000 bits of skin every hour. 600,000 tiny bits of skin every hour. Dead skin. Dead skin, yeah. So do you ever wonder, like in your house, you know, there's a lot of dust that collects? Even if you keep the windows closed, right? I always used to wonder about that, like in the wintertime, you know, you keep the windows closed because it's so cold. Yet there's all this dust, and I thought, where does this dust come from? So now I know. It's from my body. Dead skin. Yeah. So yeah, just more kind of real facts about our skin, you know, and yeah. So you might feel unhappy about this kind of conversation and think, no, I want to believe that the body is beautiful. I want to believe that skin is beautiful. Well, everything's relative. Okay, so relatively, yeah, you know, some bodies are more beautiful than others. Some skin is more beautiful than others. But we're questioning here, is it really beautiful? Like, in a sort of permanent way, and, you know, from all points of view, even looking at the, you know, microscopic aspect of the body. Is it really, really beautiful, really wonderful? That's what we're looking at here. And also, the whole point of this is to overcome suffering, to free ourselves from suffering. And if you remember back in the first couple of slides, when the Buddha was talking about the causes of suffering, and he said the cause of suffering is craving, which can also be called attachment, desire. So craving, attachment, desire, this is one of the main factors in our mind that keeps us in a situation of suffering, experiencing suffering again and again and again. And in fact, the Buddha, another thing the Buddha said about desire, he said, desire never leads to satisfaction. He said it's like drinking salt water. When you're thirsty, if you drink salt water, does that quench your thirst? Will your thirst be quenched? So don't try it. But I think we can imagine that it wouldn't work. It would just make us more thirsty. So just as drinking salt water just increases thirst rather than quenching thirst, in the same way, following desire, following attachment doesn't lead to satisfaction. It leads to more desire, more wanting, craving. So you can think about that in terms of your own experience in life, right? So sometimes we want something very much, and we might dream about it, fantasize about it, think, oh, if only I had that, I would be so happy. And maybe you get it. Yeah, you might get that thing that you want so much. But then what? Right? What's the result of that? Do you continue to be happy? I mean, in the beginning, of course, there's a lot of happiness, enjoyment, excitement. But how long does that last? How long does that happiness last? Or does it change into something else, like becoming dissatisfied with it, wanting something else, something better, something more, getting bored with it? Yeah. Has that ever happened to anybody? You ever had that experience? No? We don't want to admit it. So yeah, so that's what the Buddha was talking about. So desire, attachment. He said as long as we have that in our mind and we keep following that, then instead of reaching a point where we're happy, satisfied, fulfilled, we just keep having more desire, more craving, more grasping. So attachment to bodies and pleasurable things, food, music, money, big houses, and so on, we need to question, is this really the way to find happiness, the way to find satisfaction? And the point, like with this, is not to go to the opposite state of mind and feel aversion, disgust, hatred. No, that's not the point. We're not trying to develop aversion for the body, but just kind of a middle place, a balanced place where we kind of accept the body as it is. We see it as it is, impermanent and not fully beautiful and satisfying. But we don't have aversion for it. Yeah, that's another affliction. We don't want to go there. And also, Buddhism says that having a human body is particularly valuable. Yeah, there's this talk of a precious human life. So having a human life healthy body and all the resources that we need to engage in spiritual practice. So this is actually something really precious, really valuable, really fortunate. So we want to take care of our body, take care of our life, so that we can live as long as possible and continue our spiritual practice, and also doing things to benefit others. So we're not like trying to develop aversion, hatred for our bodies, but just to be in a middle place where we neither have attachment, desire, craving, nor aversion, hatred, but just a neutral place with regard to our body. So let's go back to the previous slide, because there was one more. The fourth of the wrong conception. Can't see all of it because of that black bar in the bottom. Move the black bar somewhere. Okay, so things that lack a self have a self. Is that what that says? What does the fourth one say?
To think that, to believe that what it has no entity.
Yeah, because in the English it's self.
Yes, yeah. This is
that.
Yeah, I say entity right? Because I made a literal translation from the English, but the English term in which it was based is self.
Okay.
Or.
Okay. Okay. As long as that's clear. Yeah. So, so this is a really difficult one to understand, and it's one of the kind of unique features of the Buddhist teachings, having to do with self, a sense of I, me, myself. So everyone, ordinary beings, have a sense that there's a real self somewhere inside of us, a real I. And we also tend to be very attached to ourself, thinking I am more important than everybody else. I'm the most important person in the universe. I don't know, am I the only one who thinks that way, or does anyone else think that way? You ever notice that feeling? I am most important, more important than everybody else. And so probably most people never really question that sense of self. Yeah, like, what is it? Is it really there? Do I really have such a self? Sometimes it's also called ego, or ego. So, different terms for it. But what the Buddha discovered is that we're actually mistaken about this. That the self, the ego that seems to be there, seems to be real, and that we tend to get very attached to, it's actually like a phantom, like not really there, not as we think it is. And so this is an aspect of Buddhism that's sometimes called selflessness, or emptiness, or non-self. And it's a very difficult aspect of the Buddha's teachings. And we're not going to go into it here. We don't really have the time. But I'm just letting you know that the Buddha invites us to question our sense of self, to explore the sense of self, and check if it really exists the way we think it does or not, if it's really something there or not. Because this is said to be the root cause of all of our problems. The root affliction, the root delusion is believing in and grasping at this I, this self. From there, from that attitude, all the other afflictions, attachment, aversion, pride, jealousy, all other afflictions and all karma that keeps us stuck in suffering, it all comes from that. It's like the root problem. So these are just some aspects of the Buddhist teachings about our mind and different conceptions that we have that we need to check and investigate. And so these 4 establishments of mindfulness do involve questioning these attitudes and checking if they are true or not. Any questions about these before we move on? Oh yeah.
I'm sorry to ask this, but I wonder with the impermanence, if everything is impermanent, is that I was just, it popped out in my mind, if we become enlightened, is that permanent?
Mm-hmm.
And if our mind is becoming enlightened, and you said that in Buddhism, our mind will last forever, do we reborn as an enlightened person in the next life?
So the words, the term impermanent and permanent, the way that they're used in Buddhism is somewhat different than the way we normally use them in our Western society language. So in Buddhism, when we say something is impermanent, the main meaning of that is that it changes. It doesn't stay the same, but it's changing. That's the main meaning of impermanence. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will come to an end at some point. Right? So sometimes that is the case. Like with our body is impermanent. It's changing moment by moment by moment. And at some point it will end. It will go out of existence. But when it comes to our mind is impermanent. It's changing moment by moment by moment. But the mind will never go out of existence. This is the view there's different views about this in Buddhism. In the Mahayana schools, that's the view, that mind will always exist. It will never go out of existence. So after eventually we become enlightened, our mind becomes enlightened mind, it will continue to exist as an enlightened mind, and it will never go out of existence. But there are some Buddhists in the Theravada tradition who have the view that when someone becomes enlightened, like the Buddha, when he became enlightened, and then when he attained parinirvana, he passed away, at that time his mind went out of existence. His mind ceased to exist. So they have that view. But in Mahayana Buddhism, we say, no way. Buddha's mind could never go out of existence. It always exists and continues to come into the world to benefit us, to benefit sentient beings. So there's differences of view in different schools of Buddhism about that. So even though mind is changing moment by moment by moment, and in that way it's impermanent, but at the same time we wouldn't say it's permanent, but we could say it's eternal. Eternal, meaning it will last forever, it will never go out of existence. And there are some things that are permanent. It isn't the case that everything is impermanent. Some things are permanent, but this is kind of difficult to understand. There are certain sort of abstract things that they're not made of molecules, particles, and also they're not mind, thoughts and experiences. They're kind of more abstract things. They do exist, but they are said to be permanent, meaning they don't change. They don't change moment by moment. So one example, the third noble truth is called true cessation, true cessations. And when you pinpoint what is a true cessation is the absence of an affliction like hatred or greed or ignorance, when it has been completely eliminated from the mind and it will never arise again. So once that affliction has been eliminated and will never come back, that is a true cessation. That is said to be a permanent phenomenon, meaning there's nothing there that changes. It's not like made of particles that are changing. It's just an absence. So it's a little hard to understand, but anyway, that's one example of something that's permanent. So there are things that are permanent, but they're more difficult to understand. So most of the things that we deal with, like our bodies, our minds, the things in the world around us, these things are all impermanent things. But that's a good question. It's kind of a tricky point. Any other questions? So I hope I'm not giving you too much. An online question? Okay.
En inglés está. Sí. This morning you gave the Four Noble Truths as an example of an impermanent phenomenon. In what way is that teaching impermanent changing?
In which way? What?
In what way is that teaching of the Four Noble Truths impermanent?
Four Noble Truths or the teachings of the Four Noble Truths?
I think
the teachings, I guess, not. Because the question is, this morning you gave the Four Noble Truths as an example of an impermanent phenomenon.
No, that's not correct. No. I think the question, she asked the question.
Kind of the same
she asked the question. Right? She asked the question about an example of a phenomenon, the fourth of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Your answer.
She said, "What's an example of a phenomenon?" And my first answer was the Four Noble Truths. But then I changed that because I thought I'm not sure if that is a good example of a phenomenon. And then I used a computer instead, a computer or a house. Yeah. So those would be better examples. So yeah, it's not that I didn't say that the Four Noble Truths are an example of an impermanent phenomena. That's not correct. Because, among the Four Noble Truths, right? Right. As I just said, the third Noble Truth is permanent. The first Noble Truth, the second Noble Truth, those phenomena are impermanent. Those are impermanent. And also the fourth Noble Truth, path, that's also impermanent. But the third Noble Truth is not. That's permanent. So we just have a few minutes left. Let's look at the next slide. This is not that one, next one. Yeah. So this is just an overview of the first of the four establishments of mindfulness on the body. How to practice mindfulness of the body. So we won't have time to do all of these, but we can do some of them. So in that sutra, this is the Satipatthana Sutra, the sutra of the establishments of mindfulness. The Buddha explained these 6 ways to practice mindfulness of the body. So first is breathing. So we've already started practicing that, just becoming aware of the breathing and remembering the breathing, being mindful of the breathing. And the second is bodily postures. So that is paying attention to what our body is doing, what kind of posture our body is in. And so the Buddha said to his followers, whether you are sitting or standing or walking or lying down, he mentioned those 4 postures. Be mindful. Have mindfulness of, what posture your body is in. He didn't mention standing on your head or hanging upside down. Maybe people didn't do those kind of things in those days, or juggling. But mainly he mentioned 4 postures. So he was talking to his followers who were monks, and he advised them, whether you were sitting, whether you were standing, whether you were walking, whether you were lying down, be aware. Just have awareness of what position your body is in. So it's just an extension of mindfulness from the breath to the whole body and the different positions that the body can be in. And the third is activities of the body. And so sometimes our body is involved in more active things like juggling or working or running, lots of different activities that the body can be in. So again, the Buddha, speaking to his followers, his monks and nuns who were following him, he said, pay attention, what your body is doing. When you're going somewhere, when you're coming back, just have mindfulness of the body. And the 4th is parts of the body. And the Buddha spoke about 32 parts of the body. I mean, there's more than that, but he mainly mentioned 32. And so there's a whole meditation on these 32 parts of the body where you just think about, you just contemplate, starting with the external parts of the body, like the skin and the nails, the teeth, hair, and then going into the body. And so ideally you learn about the different parts of the body and what their composition is, what they're made of, and certain features about them. Like I already mentioned, the skin. So you kind of learn about that part of the body. And then you practice mindfulness of how the body is made up of these different parts. And many people some people find this meditation kind of, ugh, I don't really want to think about my guts and my bones and so on. But if you understand the purpose and the benefit, it's to help overcome attachment and desire and unrealistic ideas that we have about our body. And so some people find it really powerful, very, very, very powerful. Yeah, because we tend to think of our body, I don't know, if you check, you kind of think of our body as one whole thing. We have one whole body, but we don't normally think of it as composed of parts. Yeah? And we kind of mentally break it down into its parts and see how it's just all these different parts. you just get a very different view of your body than you did before, and it can really help to have a more balanced attitude about the body instead of being overly excited and attached to the body, but also not, people sometimes have aversion for their body. They hate their body, and that's not a good attitude either. So neither of those attitudes is healthy. So if we just see our body in a more realistic way, it's just made of all these different parts, and it's impermanent, changing all the time. It actually has an effect on really calming the mind down and making grounding. We have this expression in English, grounded, feeling more grounded in reality, as opposed to having kind of unrealistic ideas. And then I'll just quickly mention the other two, and then we'll have a break. So the elements of the body. So this is in Asia, they talk about 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. You may have heard of these. They also talk about them in certain forms of medicine, like Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and so on. They talk about these different elements. So the Buddha also talked about how our body is made of these 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. We'll do a meditation on that at some point, because that's very interesting, very interesting. And then the 6th is corpses. So this is not for beginners. That meditation is not for beginners. So it's said that you need to be quite mature and experienced in your practice of meditation to do that one. But it basically involves just contemplating what happens to our body in the end and how it turns into a corpse. And that really is very powerful for overcoming attachment. Like, okay, this body, and eventually it's just going to be a corpse. So what is there to be attached to? What is there to be excited about with this body? And you may have heard that at the time of Buddha, the Buddha's disciples would sometimes go and sit in a cemetery. And in India, the cemeteries weren't like here, where you put the body in the ground and you put this nice monument on top of it. But there would be cemeteries where the bodies were just laid out in the open, and then animals would come, like vultures and hyenas. Different animals would come and tear the bodies apart. So they were pretty gruesome places. And some of the Buddha's disciples would go and meditate and just look at these corpses and think, this is what's going to happen to my body. So it's very helpful for overcoming attachment and generating a strong determination to attain freedom from suffering, freedom from samsara. So that's the purpose. But we're not going to do this one here, so don't worry. I'm just letting you know that there's these different ways of practicing mindfulness with regard to the body. So we'll do some of them, but yeah, not all of them.